Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how to paint these white daisies in a barrel planter, and I didn't use any gouache or any other medium except watercolor. And we did use professional watercolor paints. I used Winsor & Newton and Letter Sparrow. I also used a size 2 round Polina Bright brush and 140-pound cold press watercolor paper. In the center of my paper, I am sketching out a very simple oval shape. My barrel of daisies is going to go in the middle of that, but I want the oval shape to be there because I'm actually going to paint in a little background so that my daisies stand out against the white paper. I'm also putting in a very simple sketch of the barrel design so that I can know where to lay down the masking fluid for the daisies. My biggest tip for sketching the barrel is to make sure that the ends of your lines curve upward to give the illusion of curvature. I'm also placing a few dots around so that I can have a better picture of spacing for my daisies. And I'm using masking fluid to paint out my daisies. So masking fluid is kind of like rubber glue. It preserves the paper color underneath. So because I want my daisies to be white, I'm painting masking fluid in the shape of my daisies. 5 petals, 3 petals, 4 petals. I'm kind of going all over the place with it, a little bit random because I want it to look organic. And when it completely dries, I will be able to paint my yellow background, the greenery around it, and my daisy colors of my petals will stay white. So then once the background I've painted around the daisies completely dries, I will be able to take the masking fluid off, and you'll see that in a minute. I have a video that goes into more detail about that on my channel as well. So now I am moving into painting the background, and I wanted to do a soft golden yellow color. I don't want this color to be the main focus of my painting. I wanted it to look a little vintage, so I kept it really light around the center. I like that it looks a little bit blotchy and it's not really smooth. And then on the edges, while it's still wet, I'm going through and adding a higher pigment of color so that it has a really cool outlined effect, but it also blends in and looks really nice and has that vintage feel. I also want to make sure that around where the daisies are, it gets really, really light and there are not stark lines because I want my leaves and the greenery to blend in with it as well. I'm also placing some concentrated color right at the base of the barrel to create a shadow. And again, this is when the paper is still wet, so it has a nice blending effect into the rest of the background. Another thing I wanted to do before the background completely dries is to put down a very light green watery wash just around the edges of where the greenery is planned to be for my whole entire plant. And this makes it so that the edges of where the greenery is going to be a really nice and soft transition from that green to the yellow. And so we won't have any weird stark lines. It creates a really nice soft effect. And again, I wanted it really light. Once that light green color has dried, I can go in with a more mid-tone green and add some details. So I'm adding lines and little dabs of color to represent areas that are more concentrated in greenery, leaves, things like that. And I'm keeping it really loose, keeping it really random and organic, not doing too much in one area. We really want some of that light green to shine through, but this is the majority of our green color, and so we really want to make sure it goes all over our intended area for the greenery. And don't be afraid to paint right over the top of the masking fluid, because once the masking fluid comes off, all of the lines and the splotches will make total sense and look amazing together. This is also the point where you can start adding little dabs of color to represent some of the leaves that may be falling onto the barrel or off the side of the plant. Now I'm going through and adding a slightly darker color of the mid-tone green. I did this before the other green was totally dry because I like when the two colors mix together a little bit. And then we'll add a darker, very strong contrasting green for the rest of the details at the end. While those green colors dry, we are going to start on the barrel. And the barrel is a mixture of a dark red color and the golden color that we used for the background. And I did this because I wanted to bring in the warmth from the background into the barrel so that everything looks nice and cohesive. I put down a mid-tone wash of this brown color on all of the panels of the wood, and then I went through and added highly concentrated pigment of the brown color to areas that need shadow or need just a little bit more interest and contrast. And so I made sure to do this while it was still wet. Don't forget to add the shadow around the leaves that might be falling down on your barrel as well. Now that the greenery has dried, we get to go in and add our dark green. Now this dark green color adds the contrast, and it is the shadow for our plant. So it is really, really important to make our flowers pop. So you need to think about where the shadows are. They're going to be around the base of the plant, so closer to the barrel, but they're also going to be around the flowers, in and amongst the leaves. And as you get closer to the top of the plant, there will be less because that's where the light is shining more. So just keep your strokes simple, organic, and loose. For these metal bars around the barrel, I just did a really light gray. It's important to use the lighter tones first so that you can layer your darker tones later, and then that's what I'm doing. So after I laid those light tones, I'm going through while it's still wet, again, I will say that 100 times, and add a darker concentration of the pigment of gray for shadow, texture, outline. And then I'm just doing a few swipes for some added interest. And now we have reached my favorite part of the entire painting, and that's removing the masking fluid. I just love that it looks like a mess before you remove it, and then when the masking fluid comes off, all of the beautiful little flowers appear. For my centers, I wanted a very bright yellow, and so I'm using a very highly concentrated pigment of a yellow color on my palette. And I am doing kind of a semi-circle with a flat bottom on a lot of these flowers, so it looks like the center of the flower is kind of pointed upward. And I'm just kind of doing different variations of that depending on the direction the flower is pointing. But I think that adds a lot of interest instead of just doing a very simple yellow dot in the center for each flower. Now we start the potentially daunting task of adding detail to the wood panels on our barrel. Now my style is very loose, and so the benefit of that is I kind of just outline and do some details, but I don't really focus too much on making it hyper realistic. You totally can if that's your jam, but I think it's really nice to do things loose because it gives the illusion of really nice looking, realistic looking wood, but I don't have to panic if it's not perfect. So definitely do it how you want. I like to outline things a little bit, give the illusion of shadows and texture right between the wood panels, and then I just kind of go through with lighter tones of brown and add little swipes that can be, you know, texture or a roughness in the wood or shadow, things like that. So just keep it simpler than you think because I think it looks better that way. And same thing with the metal that's going around the barrel. I'm just keeping it really simple. And the great thing about watercolor is when you build up the layers, it just adds so much depth and texture and dimension. So you can see on the metal, I have a really light layer, a medium layer, and a dark layer, and that is so interesting to look at. Same with the wood now. I'm adding a very dark layer of brown, and so you have light layers, you have mid-tone layers, and dark. And I'm making sure to do some of that darkness around where you would see shadows around the metal and around where the leaves and flowers are hanging down out of the planter. And if you thought we were done with our flowers, we're not. We're not done with our flowers. We need to add a very light gray kind of shadowing to the petals. So I am keeping this so simple, doing the tiniest little dabs, not doing too much to overwhelm a flower, just a very light gray to add some shadow and interest and dimension into the petals because yes, they are white, but they need some reflective color in them. And the final step, which I think is the most important, is we are adding a golden red color to the base of every center of our flower. Now this adds so much contrast that it makes our flowers pop, and everything is going to look so much more interesting when you're looking at these flowers with the contrast of the green, the barrel, the center of the flowers. It just brings everything together. And you guys, I mean, look at that contrast and that texture. I am obsessed with how this one came out. Thank you so much for being here with me today while we painted it. I hope you try this one, and I also hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye.